Hello there, Drew Hanish of Whiskey Lore, and it is time for another whiskey tasting on Tasting Tuesday. I may not be doing one of these videos for a couple of weeks, mainly because I have a breakneck schedule of places to go over the next couple of weeks. I'm going to be going to the New Orleans Bourbon Festival. I'm going to be going on to a podcast convention where I'm going to get a chance to go to the Jack Daniel's distillery, the Uncle Nearest distillery, and then I have trips planned to Washington State to go to some distilleries out there, and also going to a travel conference out there. And I am also going to be going across Tennessee and Kentucky, and am actually going to Moonshine University to go after my executive bourbon stewardship. So that will be fun. It's going to be interesting to take the test on bourbon and see how well I do after a day at Moonshine University. So lots of stuff going on, and what I'm going to do is YouTube now has this new feature called Shorts, and so I will likely take some short videos at some of the places that I go. I like quick, easy, not a lot of editing, and let's get it out there. Let's get the content to you. So that's what I am going to do. So if I don't do a Tasting Tuesday for a little while, understand I am doing a lot of traveling, but I will do them when I can. And today we're talking value Scotch. If you are a little short on cash, or maybe you want to dip your toe in the waters of Scotch and you're not quite sure where to start, I'm going to give you two that come highly recommended by me. And they are two very different whiskeys for two very different palates. Let me put it this way. One is dessert and one is dinner. And it is sweet and savory. It's a lot of Highland and Speyside versus Islay, and really just digging into that Islay flavor. And I started my first Islay whiskey. It was a bargain Islay whiskey, and I gotta tell you, it wasn't very good. It wasn't something. And lately there's been this trend in Islay whiskeys, like with Lagavulin 8, and now with Wee Beastie from Ardbeg. You're starting to see these either non-age stated or much younger whiskeys that are coming out from Islay. And it's really an interesting trend. And the bottling we're going to do today is called Scarabus. It is from Hunter Lang. And if you're not familiar with Hunter Lang, but you are familiar with Dennis Lang, it is the same family. One of the family members who was with Dennis Lang went out on his own, brought his two sons along. That was Stuart Lang, and they started up the Hunter Lang distillery. And they moved from doing blended whiskeys to going in and trying their hand at single malts. And there's a new distillery on Islay that I've only had the pleasure of actually having lunch at. I haven't had a chance to tour it because I didn't have enough time to do a tour while I was there. Ardnahoe. And Ardnahoe is owned and was started by Hunter Lang. So the ultimate goal for Hunter Lang is that they are going to do distillation out of their Ardnahoe distillery. But that distillery started in November, on November 9th of 2018 was when they filled their first cask, which means that not till November the 10th of this year, 2011, will they actually have a barrel of Scotch, because Scotch takes 3 years and a day to mature. And that extra day, there's been some questions around why 3 years and a day. But if you think about it, the tax man doesn't want you figuring out any way to cheat the system. So best way to do that is to tack another day on to the age of your product to be able to get that certification as whiskey. So, as Scotch whiskey in that particular case. So I'm going to do a tasting on Scarabus, and if you're wondering where that name comes from, Oh, and I've forgotten exactly. I just looked it up. It's a Nordic word. It means it's rocky something or other. It's about the terrain of Islay. And I was doing some reading on the history of Islay. It's fascinating because it really went from being under Irish control to Norse control, then to Scottish control under the clans, the Lord of the Isles, and the MacDonald family, the MacDonald clan was there, and the Campbell clan was there, and just this whole big evolution. It's kind of fun to read. I was reading about the history of Bowmore for one of my Instagram posts, and so I really just, man, you can get sucked into all of that history. But let's talk about tasting. The other whiskey that I'm going to be tasting is one that, if you listen to the podcast, you are very familiar with, which is the Shackleton Blended Malt. So in Scotch whiskey, you have single malt, but you also have the blends. And the blends could be a blended malt or just a blended Scotch. Now, if it's a blended Scotch, that means it's probably got some neutral grain spirit in it, not just malt whiskey. A blended malt means that it is a combination of single malts, and there is no grain whiskey in here beyond the use of malted barley. Now, it is actually possible for a bottle of blended malt to come from just one distillery. Is it? No. It's but it could be a blend of, it could be the same company. That's what I was getting at. It could be the same company, and it could come out of two different distilleries, but if they marry two barrels of single malt from the same from two different distilleries, then it has to be called a blended Scotch whiskey, blended malt, versus a single malt, which we know that this came out of one distillery. So what distillery did it come out of? And that is something that we're going to try to pick out while doing the tasting. So Shackleton is Richard Patterson's recreation of the personality of Sir Ernest Shackleton, the explorer. And the whiskey that he found under the hut, he didn't find it. It was actually found by New Zealand research team who found these bottles that were 100 years old, still filled with whiskey and brandy and other stuff, all hidden underneath this hut. He had a chance to test it, be able to come up with a formula, sort of understanding the contents of what that whiskey was, where it was distilled even, and really trying to get down the flavors and the nose. And so it was a bit chemical analysis. It was a bit of Richard Patterson's nose to come up with a blend that would match that 100-year-old whiskey. And after they put out some special commemorative bottles, they came out with this, which is extremely affordable no matter where you go. I bought this bottle for $29 while I was in Louisville, Kentucky at a Total Wine. I'm not seeing it that cheap anywhere else. They had a special on it. Actually, I think I paid $25 for this. The regular price on this is probably going to be between $30 and $35. This is the one that when I do a tasting, I start with this. I always start with this because to me, this has a really approachable nose and palate. There's a hint of smoke in it, but it's not a peaty whiskey at all, okay? As Richard Patterson says, a little smoke to add some muscle to it. But beyond that, it's actually a really nice, somewhat complex, especially in this price point, whiskey. So the first thing I get off of it is orange pound cake. I always get this really nice orange pound cake. But there's an earthiness to it, a little grassy, a little herbal. I get cinnamon and allspice in here. maybe a little peach. Oh man, I love it when a little flavor or a scent hits me and I'm like, man, what is that? Maybe a little ginger. There's a little hint of ginger in there. And it's either apple or a peach. Somewhere in there, there's a little bit of an apple or a peach to this. All right. This has a really nice mouthfeel to it. It has some vanilla to it. A little powdered sugar. There is a pepperiness that comes in towards the finish of this. And the smoke is actually like smoking tobacco, like smoking a cigar. It's just like a little hint of that on your palate, of that kind of cigar smoke just lingering right there on your palate. It's got a nice mouthfeel to it. It's not a heavy whiskey, but it's definitely substantial enough. Juicy. There's a bit of apple there on the palate in the main part, and maybe a little bit kind of lingers on in the finish. There's some black tea in there. It's just a really interesting combination of flavors, and it is very easy drinking. The apple kind of hangs there on the finish, which is really nice. Just an excellent, really nice, easy drinking whiskey. And I brought some water. I actually made a mistake yesterday when I did my pre-testing on this, my pre-tasting yesterday of drinking the Scarabus first. Don't do that. Because I drank the Shackleton and it just tasted like smoke. All right. Scarabus. Now this one's an interesting one. And I just bought this recently. I had a friend of mine approach me about this one. He said, "You're just getting into Caol Ila." He said, "I think I have found Caol Ila's younger brother." And after nosing it and tasting it side by side with Caol Ila, it really does have some Caol Ila-like aspects to it, some things that are very specific to Caol Ila. This bottle, it may be a little bit more expensive. I think it also was on special. I bought it at my local Total Wine, and it was $29. $29 for a bottle of non-age stated. Both of these are non-age stated. This is 40% ABV, and this is 46% ABV. So Hunter Lang is wanting to come out of the chute with something substantial, and it makes me really look forward to what these guys are going to be doing at the Ardnahoe Distillery, where Jim McEwen, legendary, came from Bowmore and then Bruichladdich, so all of those Octomores and Port Charlottes and the rest. Jim McEwen, well, they got him out of retirement, and he is now over at Ardnahoe getting their distillery up and running. So I really get a sense that these guys are heading for a statement whiskey when they get started. And they're making a statement with this one because at such an affordable price. So the nose on this one is a little bit more like a matchstick smoke. The thing I get out of this that reminds me of Caol Ila is bacon. It definitely has a bacon nose to it. And there's a mintiness, like an herbally mint. And I remember getting that also out of Caol Ila. You know, it's almost like a jasmine. And jasmine is one of my favorite smells. It's really, really nice. That campfire smoke just sits there, and it is a dominant part of this nosing experience. it reminds me in a way, I get like a dark chocolate out of that nose, just coming out of that smoke. There may be a little medicinal to it, but to me this is a lot more on the kind of herbally side of things. Mm. Mm. There it is. A little bit of what I got out of Caol Ila that surprised me was a cola note. And there it is there. It's very light. It is not an aggressive palate. Actually, I think Shackleton may have more of a pepperiness to it than this does. But this definitely rides on with the smoke. The smoke is there. It's a little bit more aggressive than Caol Ila. It's younger, so that's probably part of it. There is no wood note in this at all. I don't get any oak, so you can tell it's a younger whiskey. But it, like Wee Beastie, this thing can stand on its own. It really has a nice palate to it. If you are tasting your first Islay whiskey, you're getting a good sense of what an Islay whiskey is going to be like. I love this little Andes mint at the end. That is not in Caol Ila. I don't know where that comes from, but it is just like a hint of, it's almost like a cross between that dark chocolate and mintiness of an Andes mint and chewing on a spearmint lifesaver. It has a little bit of that. Actually, I even sort of get some of that dusty kind of a palate out of it. It's really, really interesting. And yeah, this is probably going to be a little bit more harsh than some of your other more refined and aged Islay whiskeys. But if you're like me and you love peat smoke and you want more of it and you don't want the cask to over influence it, well, the cask is not influencing this much at all, because I don't really get any cask notes out of this. Even the things that you look for, like out of a bourbon cask, the vanilla, the caramel, they're really not overly present in this whiskey. It comes right at you with a very nice smoky flavor, clean finish, really clean finish on this thing. I was looking for a caramel. Beautiful mouthfeel on this thing. This is a medium to slightly heavy mouthfeel. Oh man, but that mint at the end, maybe a little bit of pepper. There's no lemon meringue in there. I get lemon meringue out of Caol Ila. So a lot of people point to Caol Ila with this one. I think they're probably right, but maybe not. I don't know. Really interesting, but it is a single malt, so it came from one distillery. Which distillery is it? Very interesting question. Well, I hope you guys enjoyed this video. It's rare. Usually I sit with a bottle for a while before I come in and do a review on it, but I enjoyed this one so much, and I thought this is a great way to leave you guys for maybe a week or two with a review of something affordable that you're going to be able to find on your shelves, that if you really want to jump into Scotch, or if you already love Scotch but you're on a budget, these are a great way to go. Shackleton and Scarabus. So again, hope you enjoyed the review. Leave your comments below. Let me know if you've tried either one of these and what you think about them. And until next time, cheers and slainte mhath.